Hi, everybody. I'm Jasmine Navarro, Certified Wellbeing Expert, and I work with educational institutions and companies delivering workshops and talks to support family wellbeing. And as you know, every week I interview different experts who make a difference in people's lives. And today I'm very happy to be talking to Stephen. Stephen, thank you so much for coming along. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to see you. You have such a nice smiling face, and we're going to have such a wonderful chat here. So my name is Stephen, and I'm a adjunct professor at the Schulich School of Business in Toronto, Canada, the number one and pretty much the coolest business school. If any of my students are here, the coolest business school in the whole wide world. Certainly the best in Canada. I've been there for 23 years. I started when I was 5 and all those jokes. And I teach in our organizational studies department. And I also work with executives for the last 20 odd years as a leadership development expert and educator. And I have a broad range of interests around organizational development and learning. And including a whole bunch of stuff, all the way from mental health. I know that's a common interest that you and I have.
Yes.
I actually, it's funny because I didn't even know this before. I actually do a lot of outreach for the school. So I work with high school students who are graduating.
Okay.
And getting them interested in, to try to get them interested in the field of organizational behavior. Because, I mean, sadly, people who enter business school don't say, oh boy, I want to study organizational behavior. But
yes,
once they're in and they take it, they're like, oh my God, I love this field. So, most people are going in for sort of some of the more traditional business school stuff. And I love that stuff too. But my focus is really on communication, leadership, management, mental health, and as well as thinking and talking. And what we're going to talk about today, it was you and I framed up as having real conversations.
Exactly. Before you go, let's just say hi to Kieran. Hi, Kieran. Lovely to have you here. And hi to everybody else who's joining. Please let us know if you have any questions, and please feel free to write comments in the chat. And no, as you were saying, Stephen, yeah, it sounds incredible, all of the stuff that you do. And you chose the title, The Impact of Real Conversations at Work. What made you come to this title, and what can you tell us about that?
Oh, you know what? There's actually I made a nice little post that I summarized it on my LinkedIn, and I think it's because so many things that have to do with my approach to teaching and my approach to the material that I teach has a lot to do with what perhaps you and I and others would call being real. Now, I'm not someone who says real is honest, because if somebody says, oh, should I be honest with everybody all the time? The answer would be no, don't do that. It's a horrible choice, right?
Okay. What is real then? What does real mean to you? I guess it's all perspective,
yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. So for me, real means a few things. I'll start at the bottom of this list that I had made. Okay. I think real means owning your stuff. So, I mean, in the workplace, it means owning your stuff. It means if you're wrong, saying you're wrong. What I used to call when I was younger and more naive, ego disillusion. Like, not sort of being hung up on the notion that my opinions of things and my own being right is the thing that defines who I am.
Yeah. So being unattached, detached.
Yeah. And to be able to, for example, in personal lives and in work lives, like it's an essential quality for a leader, or really anybody who manages people, and of course, anybody, period, to be able to say, hey, look, you know what? I don't have all the answers all the time. And I'm wrong sometimes. And sometimes I lose my crap. And sometimes I'm not as good as I could be. And sometimes I don't listen as well as I could. And we spend a lot of time, especially my students, sort of writing in their LinkedIn profiles and their resumes, here's the 800 reasons why I'm fabulous. And that's great, but when it comes to the real stuff of work and life, I think it's really important, especially for leaders, to create the vulnerability that says, I'm going to own my stuff. And that was sort of my second thing about being real. And that's like being not afraid to be vulnerable. That doesn't mean going into work every day crying about, for your financial problems or the fight you had with your mate or your partner.
Yeah.
But it does mean, if you're having a challenge as a leader, to being able to own up to it and talk about it, and maybe not even talking about the details, but saying, hey man, I need a little space, or hey, I need a little help, or I'm not the best that I could be today, or whatever it might be.
Okay. And I think when you're being real as well, I think then you have more chance at actually solving whatever problem you have, don't you? Because if you pretend everything's going great, probably people are not going to help you, and you're not really seeing what's happening. So you're sort of in this illusion of fakeness.
Absolutely. And, we've got a lot of this today. And listen, it's my fault. People like you and I, it's our fault because we want everybody to be positive and happy, right? And so we get this sort of toxic positivity now swinging the other way, which is like, you always have to cope and you always have to be resilient. And I just don't think you have to. No, and it doesn't mean that you have to come and again, it doesn't mean you have to tell the details to what's going on with you. But I'm actually currently writing something about this right now, about the idea that, like, my son's going, my early 20s son is going through a bad breakup. Okay. So he's crushed. And so are we, my wife and I, we're upset by it. So, like, I'm going to go to work and I'm distracted by this. I don't have to tell people what I just told you and whoever else is listening.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you that, but it is worthwhile to say, hey, look, I'm a little distracted today, and if I'm not at my best, cut me some slack or forgive me or whatever it is, right? And so I think that's that enables us, to your point, it enables me to be able for that person to say, hey, that's okay, no problem. You know what? We have this big meeting coming up. Can I put it aside for a couple hours? Like you say, the more you're able to be vulnerable, the more people are, ready to be willing to lend a hand. And I think that most people do want to help.
Of course, if you let them, you've got to let them, haven't you?
Yeah. And so I see here somebody's jumping in and saying toxic positivity is a really dangerous thing, right?
Exactly.
And it is, this idea that I have to be resilient all the time, and you don't. It's okay to be not okay, as Amy Edmondson puts it.
Exactly. And sometimes, like you said, when you mentioned about not having to delve into the whole story about what's happening, you can just say, I'm a little distracted right now. And sometimes even just you being able to say that helps you as well. And you might actually, just because you've said that might make you relaxed. And then you have
a little catharsis. Yes,
exactly. It actually helps you as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think relationships of all kinds at work are really important. Because that's why I wrote that other point that I call making friendlies at work. I actually just recently wrote an article for The Conversation.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a really great publication from the UK originally, actually, and in Canada and the US as well. And the idea is that, there's different, when I talk about friends at work, people usually think, a lot of executives will tell me, well, I don't need to be friends with people at work. And of course, for me, that means it's sort of ridiculous, because it's like, you're going to go to work, you're going to spend like 50% of your waking life in a building or what have you, doing your work. And the notion that for that huge component of my time of living and breathing on Earth, that the people around me, it's okay to be cold and distant from them, doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. And I don't think anybody really wants that, but I think we're afraid of developing relationships, or we've had bad experiences, and I get it. But just because we want to make some relationships work doesn't mean we have to be BFFs with everybody. But it does mean that we have to sort of get to this place where I call it a workplace friendly. It's not a friend; it's a friendly. Right?
Okay, what's the difference?
The difference is a friendly is somebody who you open up a little bit to, but not to the extent of perhaps your bestie who you grew up with, who you've known for 20 years or whatever, right? And it's somebody who it's a friend of convenience at work. And I don't think it's fake or shallow. It's like anything. We've got gradations of everything. We've got dimmer switches on our lights, right? Same thing. We've got a continuum. So there's something in between that person's a jerk and I don't like them, and they're my best friend in the world. That's the point of my article, is that there's a lot of stuff in between, and it benefits us. in
Yeah.
terms of a whole bunch of things to have a little bit of that.
No, you're right. Do you think that you can control that? Because maybe you want to develop a deeper friendship with somebody at work because the connection is just, deepening and deepening. And do you think you still have to say, no, I cannot go further with this person?
I don't think you have to say no.
Okay.
But I think what you do have to do is acknowledge that when you get like BFF, like what we used to call back in, I'm sorry to say this, in our day, your work spouse, you know what I mean? The work husband, the work wife, the work partner. Those things are wonderful relationships to have. But they carry with them risks of, if you have a big fight, it spills over into work, or, if whatever, there's a lot of risk associated with that level of friendship. But to say I'm going to avoid it because it's bad, no. But what you can do is say, look, I'm going to approach it. I'm going to lean into it, but I have to know what the risks are. And the risks include things like it'll be harder to give negative feedback. It'll be harder to end the relationship. Again, if you have a big fight or a conflict, it might spill over into work. Other people might say things, but of course people say things anyhow, right? No matter what it is, right? So I wouldn't advise people, hey, stay away from it. But I would say if you deem it to be too risky, then it might be worthwhile, sort of keeping it at drawing a boundary for yourself.
Sounds like you're saying it's about being conscious as well. And Magnus says, I love this conversation. Having clear boundaries when it comes to work relationships is very important. And that's just what you were saying, actually, you're just about to say about boundaries, weren't you?
Yeah. And to the point of saying having boundaries is important. But it doesn't mean you have to have complete boundaries. You have to know what they are and what the expectations that come from them. Lots of successful business people are married. We have this exists in the world. There are people who have romantic relationships who work together. There are family businesses where people are very close and have very successful businesses and organizations. Those can work really well. But like any relationship, the deeper it is, the more there's disclosure, the greater the risk. So it's all about going in with your eyes open, I guess.
Wow. Really... I never saw it like that, actually. That's really interesting that you're saying the deeper the relationship, the greater the risk. Because I would always think, which totally makes sense now you've said it, but I would always think the deeper the relationship, the lower the risk. Because then if you have a deeper relationship, you would more likely be loyal to each other.
Well, yeah, because so to me, like inherent in risk is the fact that it could go either way. It's like money, right? So it's like, I always use this when I talk to business people. It's like the bigger the financial risk, the bigger the potential upside, but also the bigger the potential downside.
Right. Okay.
Right.
You're right.
So it can go either way. So can it result in the things that you're talking about? Absolutely. Can you have the kind of trust that enables you to do the things we started talking about? Like, hi, we have such a great relationship that I can walk in the morning with a smile painted on my face and say, hey, hi, Jasmine, do you mind closing the door? I close the door. I'm falling apart today. I'm going to lose my mind. That great relationships make it easier to do that, right?
Yes.
So those are one of the less risky things. But again, it's like any relationship in life. The more vulnerable, the more risk, the more potential upside, but also the more potential downside.
You're right, actually. It's about looking at it from both points.
Yeah.
And it seems like what you're saying throughout this conversation, sounds like it's about balance as well. Like not one extreme or the other. It's about finding that middle ground.
Absolutely. Or whatever gradation works for you. So I try to look at it like volume. It's like, the best volume isn't 5 out of 10. It's whatever appeals to your ears. But we know that the highest volume will probably be too loud and the lowest will probably be too quiet. And that's sort of the way I look at friends at work. And that's why this article has become really, really popular, is this idea that you have choices between, I don't like you, I hate you, which is not a good choice. And we're BFFs, which, can be wonderful, but carries a lot of risk.
Yeah. So in your article, have you written about being in the middle then? About balance?
Yes. Yeah, actually, I on purpose made 4 levels, so there wasn't a middle.
Oh, really?
Even number, yeah. Right? I've been in school too long, so I don't want anyone to know the pick C, right? You know how that works, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, the one that I think is the most realistic for most people is the second lowest. So I call it's the workplace friendly. And that's like, It's a convenient friendship. There's enough openness. There's not as much risk, but you still get some of the benefits, which is you have someone to talk to if you're down, but not so close that you have to tell them, well, I'm a little off today. Here's the reason why. I can say I'm a little off today. Here's what I need. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a friend who perhaps you'll be close with, at work, and you might go for some meals and do a little complaining to the to each other about that person who's annoying in accounting or whatever, or but I don't know why I always pick on accounting, but anyhow, but you may not continue that friendship if you leave the organization.
That's true. Right. Okay. What's the impact of not having these real conversations at work then? I know you have said about risk, but
the risk on the other side is greater because it has no upside potential, really. Other than because the only upside potential people point out when they're not at all friends with people at work is the same kind of upside potential that people talk about when they say, well, if you love people, if you don't love anybody ever in your whole life, then you'll never get hurt. Well,
right. Okay.
It's like that. It's like, yeah, but you take away also the potential for any joy. So I think if you don't have any friends at work, you miss out on being able to, I don't know, share a laugh with somebody at work, which I think is kind of cool, or, have something to get up for in the morning. If you're only going out to earn your daily bread at work and you don't have anyone to share a laugh with or exchange a smile with, I think it's going to be pretty lonely. And we already have this epidemic of loneliness worldwide right now since the pandemic, and it's only getting worse. And I think that when we choose to never ever trust anybody, then we don't have those upside benefits. But of course, again, the risk. It's like, I was just telling my son this when he had this big breakup. It's like, mourning is the price you pay for love, and it's the same thing with friendship. It's like, the bad stuff that can come is the price you pay for having the good stuff. And you just simply can't get one without the other.
So it's balance again. It's all about.
Yeah, exactly.
I never looked at it like that, but yeah, totally. When you said mourning is the price you pay for love.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it said like that. I've heard it said in different other ways.
Yeah. But it's that. So if you have no friends at work, and there's also some really practical reasons, like business wise.
Yeah. Tell us.
So like some of them are, I think anyone who's listening here or anywhere will agree that if you are unhappy in the expenditure of your time, people are less interested in giving you stuff, whether that be jobs, opportunities, promotions, new, whatever. So nobody really.
Why is that? Because that's normally when you need it the most.
Yeah, well, because nobody, it's like when you smile, everyone, the whole world smiles with you, right? And when you frown alone. Because people want to be there for you, but they have a limit. They're like, oh, I'm here for you, but then they're sort of like, okay, it's been like 20 minutes. I'm done now. I got to move on to my stuff.
But do you think that means that people always, and it's just part of being human, that we're always thinking about ourselves then? Because
yeah.
Smiling with people because you think, oh, this is going to make me happy subconsciously or something.
Yeah. I think people do like to help, but again, I think people have limits and they don't want to spend all their time doing that. But again, it's this balance, or I like to call it a continuum. It's like people will help up to a point. It's like you reach out for, and everyone's been there. It's like you have something in your life that happens, a bad breakup when you're in your 20s, and all your friends want to be around you for the first couple months. But if that goes into a year, people are like, okay, I love you and I want to be here for you, but man, it's it's a buzzkill, man. You're dragging me down. I don't, and I get both sides.
Yes.
I really do, but as there are some people, sadly, who live on that, like that drama, that I need help and I'm crying all the time is their fuel. And that's sad, and that's one of the reasons why I think we use the word vulnerable, but not crushed, being crushed all the time. It's not good, but having the courage to be vulnerable is good.
So no, yeah, I like that. So what would you say to, I don't know, thinking about there's a toxic environment, I do hear that quite a lot in my job, that people are working
in
environments. Yeah. Who is responsible to change it? How can they change it? Who?
Great question.
The leader, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's me or whoever is talking. And that's sort
Yeah,
of
I
the way
love
I
that.
look at it. Or you,
Yeah.
depending on who it is, right? And I get this all the time. It's toxic to me is like a word that's like difficult. It's like, a difficult person, a toxic person, a toxic. There's no such thing as a toxic environment unless, you're working in a plant, a manufacturing facility that makes napalm or something. I don't know. Environments aren't toxic. It's behaviors, and neither are people. It's behaviors that are. And people are capable of a whole host of behaviors. So, if you're in an environment that you have decided is toxic, there's only one way to deal with it. And that is A, there's two really, adjust your perspective, or B, leave that environment. Those are the choices,
And
but
adjusting your perspective will change your behavior. Is that what you mean?
absolutely. The metaphor, I love metaphor. I use the metaphor all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
you go to a restaurant and you sit down at the restaurant and they make these unbelievable burgers. You love them. They're so good, but their fries are like, clearly they're like frozen, but they're, they'll do in a pinch. But but the burgers are like unbelievable, next level. You don't write off the restaurant altogether. You don't say, that's it, I'm never going back to that restaurant. You say, next time I go, I'm going to have the burger. I'll have a different side dish. Right. And so that's the way we look at difficult environments or toxic and so-called toxic environments. Once we label it as toxic, there's nothing, you can't fix it except to sort of sit around and wish other people acted differently, which they won't.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So it's like a book is the same thing. You read a book, you say, geez, the beginning was fabulous. You're not going to throw it away. You're just going to say, I really liked the beginning, but the end wasn't great. And it's people are the same way. Anybody who has siblings knows this, parents, in-laws. It's like, this person's in my life. I'm going to make a choice to look at the parts I like and not look at the parts that I don't like. Well, I mean, but because the alternative is, okay, well, I'm only going to go in an environment where everything is wonderful. Otherwise, it's toxic. Well, you're just not going to get that.
No.
It doesn't exist.
So it's not about avoiding, it's about
choices. Choices.
Sorry?
Choices, making a decision, making a choice.
On our perspective.
Yep. And our action. So you can always vote with your feet. I mean, people tell me this. I have my students, they're super well educated. They're like, well, what if you don't have a choice? You have to work there. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty entitled thing to say for someone who's, taking a master's program that costs $80,000 a year. Like, go, I mean, you're in the top 2% educated on the planet. Go take another job.
Wow.
And it's, I wouldn't say you have to stick around in an environment that you deem as toxic. Of course not. But you have two choices. You vote with your feet and go do something else. Or you say, you know what? I'm working with this person. I wouldn't choose to be friends with them if I wasn't working with them, but it doesn't mean they're all bad. And, aside from some exceptions, most people are not all bad who are bad.
Yeah. Are there any sort of techniques that you know of that people can do if they're in that environment and they're just feeling, that they can't do anything? It's impossible.
Yeah.
They just feel, I can't.
Right. It's a great question. I think one of them for me is all about, I mean, again, for me, it's like almost any stress, and you know this better than anybody. You change your actions or you change your mind.
Yeah, I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and either one could work. But if you're stuck on this, again, this is reality and there isn't another way to look at it, there is no way out. There is no way forward. If I've decided, when I'm working with a team of students and they tell me, well, we failed at this project because she's an idiot. Well, there's no way forward with that. You've decided this. She's an idiot. You can't un-idiot somebody once you've decided they are that, right? So, it's all about how can I frame it in a way that provides me a way forward. And so I think that for people, what can they do? I think making a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to choose to focus on the parts of that individual that I do like, that are beneficial, that they do have to offer, because there's always something. For sure there is. So that's one suggestion.
Brilliant.
And, to really have more realistic expectations. I remember my niece would tell me, she'd go into one work, she's in her 20s, she'd go to a workplace, say, they're a jerk, so I'm leaving. And they're a jerk. And so eventually my wife and I were like, you're never going to find a workplace without a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's one everywhere. So the question is, you either find, a nirvana workplace, which you won't, or you learn how to deal with a jerk. And so, so for me, I like this frame, and this may be helpful for people because it brings choice. It's like, there's no difficult person. There's just a person I haven't figured out how to get on with yet. And so I think so that it begins with that frame. And then it's about saying things like, setting boundaries is a big one, and there's a whole bunch of ways you can set boundaries. Hey, you know what? When we're in our meetings, I don't love when you talk disparagingly about this person. Can you please not do that? Asking for what you want. So that's a great way to do it.
Exactly.
The other one is
working on yourself.
Yeah. And the other way is to learn how to do things like, which I call mind control, changing the topic. It's part of boundaries. It's just like, there's two ways. Like when you set a boundary, you don't say, you don't have to always say I'm setting a boundary. You can just set it. For your behavior,
Oh no, they're very powerful tools that you can do. And actually, like you said, something similar, but the people who we may find difficult to work with, they're actually there to teach us something, aren't they? Because if they weren't, like you said, like your niece kept going to different offices, but she was probably meeting that same person in a different place. And so avoiding definitely isn't the answer.
No, I mean, and it's especially challenging today because a lot of young people, often, and older people too, the expectation is that everyone will agree with everything that they think and say all the time, and that if not, that person's a jerk. Because we've forgotten how to have debates, and we've forgotten how to disagree with each other in a beautiful way, and you can, and it's okay to say, have you heard of Nedra Tawwab?
I don't know.
Oh my God, you love her.
Oh, really?
So she's an author, and she's this African American woman, and she's written a couple books on families.
Okay.
But her stuff works everywhere, and it's about, I encounter in my work very often people who say, I'm going to call it dumb stuff. Like they say things that I think, how could you think that? And and you're going to encounter that everywhere, but you have choices. So you don't always have to get into it with that person.
Exactly.
You could say, interesting. I never thought of it that way. And now you could say, so what about that sports team? Or, where should we go for a burger? Like, change this topic, talk about something else. And people will say, well, I shouldn't have to.
I love it. Instead of letting it trigger you and hurt you, you don't have to. You don't have to.
No, you don't have to. And you know what? It's not going to work. Even if you do, it's not going to be successful. Even if you say, oh my God, that's a terrible thing to think. No one's ever said, oh, you're right. I won't think that anymore. It's never going to happen.
Exactly.
But by the same token, if you've decided that you don't want to do that, then you can go somewhere else.
You can go somewhere else if you really want, like you said, change your mind or change your
mind or change your actions. Yeah.
Hi, Bashir. How are you doing? And anybody else, if you have any questions, comments, please let us know. No, but that's really, really interesting, Stephen. I like the fact that you've given away some tangible things that people can do. And even if they try one of them, that could change something, couldn't it? I mean,
yes,
tiny changes.
Absolutely. I'm big into experimentation. It's like people ask me all the time, what's the best approach to dealing with this? And my answer is always the one that works.
Exactly, because one could work one day and not another day. We've got to explore, haven't we? And be patient with, and things are not always quick as well. But no, thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's been really insightful, and it's always good, even if you've heard some of them, it's always good to hear them again, because with me, I know just having these reminders, and that's why I do these lives every week, because I've learned some things from you. You've reminded me of other things, and it's just hopefully for other people as well, because I think we need the constant. Well, I do constant.
I do too, and believe me, it helps me to say them too. I remind myself all the time.
Exactly. Is there anything else you want to say before we go on that topic?
I would just like to offer people up that this something I mentioned at the beginning, just to cycle back about owning your stuff. And I think a big part of that is I think one of the ways of operationalizing, turn that into something that you could do, is to just make a commitment to be somebody who is curious rather than opinionated.
Love it.
To try to find out answers and to be willing to change and evolve. Say, this idea that we have to be consistent all the time as leaders is sort of nonsense. We don't. Consistency is way overrated.
Oh, I love that. You're the first person I've heard say that, actually, Stephen.
Oh, because it doesn't make any sense. It's like, I want to be consistency. So I was 25 and now I'm 55. I hope I'm not the same. I hope I'm much better than I was when I was 25, right? And because of that speaks to the fact that human beings are evolving as individuals. I mean, we're growing as people, and part of growing up as people isn't so much just drawing boundaries and those kinds of things. That's great. It's also changing your mind, saying, you know what? I think differently about this thing.
Yeah, it's okay to change your mind. I love that, because some people get stuck and they think, I've always done this and I have to carry on doing this, and it's not even helping them anymore.
No, it doesn't work, and it's not reasonable, and we can evolve and to feel great about it.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you so much, Stephen. How can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Stephen Friedman, StephenFriedman, LinkedIn. So just go to LinkedIn and type in my name, and that's pretty much where I hang my hat. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Lots of posts, and lots of all my writing sort of ends up there. Of course, I also write on Medium and a couple other publications, so you can seek me out there. And if you're,
have you got the links? You can put them in the post if you like.
Oh yeah, can I do that? Where do I do
Not
that?
on here.
In the chat?
It's not possible to write on the chat. Only the viewers can. But on the actual LinkedIn post, you can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, share everything.
Yes.
Articles, anything you have, because I know you write some really interesting articles. And thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And I will see everybody else next week.
Likewise. I'll look forward to coming in and visiting you again.